let's wander back to a snowy winter evening. Many years ago, while I was attending college in the city of Chicago, I made many wonderful friends. Some of those friendships have lasted through the years and remain close to my heart even today. One winter, several classmates invited me to celebrate New Year's Eve with them at a well-known restaurant called the Grand Maple House, located in the heart of the city. At the time, I was living in a student residence hall near the university campus. Most of my friends, however, still lived with their families in a nearby neighborhood called Oakwood Heights. Oakwood Heights was known for its lively atmosphere. Concerts, community gatherings, and cultural events were often held there. During my years as a student, I attended many of those events and always felt welcomed. Looking back now, those memories seem wrapped in a warm glow, like distant lights shining through a winter evening. Welcome back to Bedtime Stories on Canvas, a quiet corner where gentle stories meet the slow movement of paint across a canvas. A place to leave the noise of the day behind, to settle into a comfortable position and allow your thoughts to drift a little more slowly. As soft brushstrokes glide across the screen, perhaps you can let your shoulders relax, let your breathing become calm and steady, and join me for a true story from a winter long ago. Before we begin, if you enjoy relaxing stories like these, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. It helps Bedtime Stories on Canvas reach more listeners looking for a peaceful way to end their day. Now, let's get back to our today's beautiful story. The winter that year was particularly harsh. I had arrived in Chicago during the coldest part of the season, when the weather seemed to change without warning. Outside, snow covered almost everything. The sidewalks had disappeared beneath thick white blankets. The city parks looked like frozen paintings. Trees stood quietly beneath layers of snow, and the icy wind moved through the streets with surprising strength. Temperatures had fallen well below freezing. Each breath created little clouds in the air. The cold was powerful, yet there was something beautiful about it too. The city seemed calmer beneath the snow. The world moved a little slower. And on certain evenings, when snowflakes drifted down beneath the streetlights, it almost felt as though time itself had paused. Fortunately, I had expected such weather and arrived prepared with warm clothing and heavy boots. The cold itself wasn't what surprised me. The real surprise came later that evening. When I entered the restaurant and joined my friends at the table, I noticed someone sitting among them whom I hadn't expected to see. For a moment, I simply stared. Then recognition slowly appeared. It was an old friend from my high school years. His name was Michael. We had grown up together in a small town called Riverdale and had shared many memories during our teenage years. I had no idea he was living in Chicago, and I certainly didn't know he was friends with the same group who had invited me to the celebration. The discovery caught me completely off guard. Sometimes life works in unexpected ways. You travel far from home. You meet new people. You begin building a different chapter of your life, and then suddenly, someone from your past appears as if no time has passed at all. Michael smiled when he saw me. I smiled back. And in that instant, many old memories returned. The restaurant buzzed with excitement as people prepared to welcome the new year. Music floated softly through the room. Conversations blended together. Outside, snow continued to fall beyond the windows. Inside, warmth, friendship, and laughter filled the air. And among all the familiar and unfamiliar faces gathered that night, seeing an old friend again became one of the most memorable moments of the evening. As the gentle paint strokes continue moving across the canvas, perhaps this story offers a simple reminder. Life often carries us in different directions. People come and go. Years pass. Cities change. Yet some friendships have a remarkable way of finding us again when we least expect it. And sometimes, the greatest surprises arrive quietly on an ordinary winter evening when we think we already know exactly how the night will unfold. The memories of that snowy New Year's celebration stayed with me for many years. What remained strongest in my mind was the unexpected reunion with my old friend, Michael. After all those years apart, it felt as though we had simply picked up a conversation that had been paused for a while. Neither of us wanted the evening to be our last meeting. So before we parted ways, we agreed to meet again soon. And that is exactly what happened. Not long afterward, Michael and I sat together in another restaurant, far from the holiday crowds and celebrations. We spent hours talking. One story led to another. One memory unlocked 10 more. We remembered childhood adventures, school days, old friendships, and all the small moments that seemed ordinary at the time, but somehow became precious as the years passed. The conversation stretched late into the night. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. There is something special about reconnecting with someone who knew you long before adulthood arrived. Several years later, our paths crossed once again. At that time, I was working for a cultural organization in New York that helped connect people living abroad with their homeland and traditions. One afternoon, Michael happened to visit the office. Naturally, we sat down together and began catching up once more. During that conversation, he shared a story I had never heard before. It was a story about a train journey. A journey that began only a few days after that memorable New Year's Eve celebration. Michael explained that he had boarded a train traveling south toward Nashville. The trip seemed ordinary at first. Passengers settled into their seats. The train rolled steadily through the winter landscape. Outside the windows, hills and fields drifted quietly by. Inside his compartment sat two young women. At first, they were simply strangers, sharing the same journey. But sometimes, life changes direction without warning. According to Michael, one of the young women quickly began talking with him. She was friendly, confident, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know him. Their conversation started naturally. A few simple questions, a little laughter, then more conversation. And before long, there was an undeniable connection between them. Her name was Victoria. From the very beginning, she seemed drawn to him. and Michael admitted that he felt the same. The train continued its journey through the countryside as the two spoke together. Minute after minute, mile after mile. Then came a moment neither of them would ever forget. As the train entered a long tunnel through the mountains, the compartment briefly disappeared into darkness. In that unexpected moment, Victoria moved closer to him. And before either of them fully understood what was happening, the first spark of a powerful romance was born. It was one of those rare encounters that seemed to happen almost instantly. A meeting that would leave a lasting mark on both of their lives. A love story that neither of them had planned. A love story that began between two strangers on a moving train. As Michael told me the story, I could still hear the wonder in his voice even after all those years. Victoria was impossible to overlook. She was tall and graceful, with long curls that framed her face. Her ocean blue eyes carried warmth and confidence. She dressed elegantly and carried herself with quiet sophistication. A subtle fragrance followed her wherever she went, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that left a lasting impression. There was something naturally charming about her presence, something that made people notice when she entered a room. Michael, on the other hand, had a very different appearance. He was broad-shouldered and athletic. Years of gymnastics training had given him exceptional strength and balance. His dedication to exercise had shaped a powerful physique, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had spent years developing both discipline and determination. Standing side by side, they looked very different. Yet sometimes, the strongest connections form between people who seem unlikely to meet at all. And perhaps that is one of life's quiet mysteries. Love rarely follows a schedule. It doesn't ask permission. It doesn't always arrive at a convenient moment. Sometimes it simply appears on a train on an ordinary winter day and changes everything that follows. Before the story carries you away, take a small moment to support the channel with a like and subscribe. It truly helps this calm space continue to grow. As the brush continues its slow journey across the canvas, and the colors blend softly together, allow your thoughts to drift gently with the rhythm of the story. Some meetings last only a moment. Others shape an entire lifetime. And on that train ride long ago, neither Michael nor Victoria could possibly know where that first conversation would lead. The conversation had flowed so naturally that it felt as though they had known each other much longer than a few hours. Before saying goodbye, he invited Victoria and her friend to visit his apartment for coffee. To his delight, they accepted immediately. And so, while the winter evening settled over the city, the three of them continued talking together. Stories were exchanged. Laughter filled the room. And the feeling that something unusual was happening became stronger with every passing hour. Eventually, Victoria's friend decided it was time to leave. She wished them a good evening and departed. Victoria remained at Michael's house. The two continued talking late into the night. The hours slipped by almost unnoticed. Outside, the city grew quiet. Streetlights glowed softly, beyond the windows. Inside, two people who had met only hours earlier felt themselves becoming increasingly attached to one another. By the time morning arrived, their relationship had already taken on a deeper meaning. What had begun as a chance meeting during a train ride now felt like the beginning of something much larger. Or at least, that is how Victoria saw it. As the gentle brush moves across the canvas and the colors slowly blend together, you may notice how some moments in life arrive without warning. A brief conversation, a chance encounter, a single evening, and suddenly, two people find themselves imagining a future that did not exist the day before. Yet life is rarely simple, and Michael carried a secret. Although he was not married, there was already someone important in his life. Back in Nashville, he had a longtime girlfriend. They had been together for quite some time. In fact, Michael had been planning a future with her. He imagined marriage, a home, a family, a stable life built over many years. But he had not shared any of this with Victoria, partly because everything had happened so quickly, and partly because he never truly expected this new relationship to become so serious. Victoria, however, saw things differently. From her perspective, the powerful connection they had shared seemed full of promise. She believed that their future might eventually lead them toward marriage. She saw possibility where Michael saw uncertainty, and that difference would soon become a source of conflict. As days passed, Michael found himself facing difficult questions. Questions that offered no easy answers. What would happen if Victoria visited unexpectedly? What if his longtime girlfriend arrived at the same time? What if the two worlds he was trying to keep separate suddenly collided? The possibility worried him. He valued the relationship he had already built over the years. He did not want to lose it. Yet at the same time, he could not ignore the excitement he felt whenever he thought about Victoria. There was something about her that fascinated him. She was bold, confident, open with her emotions. She expressed her feelings without hesitation. For Michael, this was something entirely new. Her passion for life seemed different from anything he had experienced before. She brought energy and unpredictability into his world. Every conversation felt exciting. Every meeting felt memorable. Yet while Victoria possessed qualities that captured his attention, Michael also recognized that his longtime girlfriend offered something different. Something equally important. She was devoted to family. She dreamed of building a warm home. She valued stability, loyalty, and tradition. The kind of qualities Michael had always imagined in a future wife. And so he found himself standing between two very different visions of love. One represented excitement, spontaneity, and powerful emotion. The other represented comfort, trust, and the future he had spent years planning. Neither choice felt simple. Neither path seemed easy. As the paintbrush continues its slow journey across the canvas, perhaps this part of the story reminds us that the heart and the mind do not always agree. Sometimes we are drawn toward what excites us. Sometimes we are drawn toward what feels safe. And occasionally, life places us between the two. The hardest decisions are not always between right and wrong. Sometimes they are between two things we value for different reasons. And on those quiet days, following that train journey, Michael found himself facing exactly that kind of choice. A choice whose consequences were only beginning to unfold. Michael and Victoria continued seeing one another. Victoria was unlike anyone he had known before. Her confidence, independence, and adventurous spirit brought a new energy into his life. Being with her felt exciting. Every trip seemed to lead to another destination. Every conversation opened a new door. And for Michael, who had always followed a fairly predictable path, that excitement was difficult to ignore. Yet his growing attachment brought new complications. Not only was he trying to balance two very different relationships, but he also found himself impressed by another aspect of Victoria's life. She had built a remarkable career for herself. Unlike many people who inherited their success, Victoria had earned hers through years of hard work and determination. She owned a popular beauty studio in Nashville. The business had become well known throughout the city. Models, entertainers, musicians, and many other clients regularly visited her salon. People trusted her skills and appreciated her professionalism. As a result, the business flourished. Victoria's success allowed her a level of financial freedom that many people only dreamed about. Whenever she and Michael traveled together, she rarely hesitated to cover the expenses. They spent time in charming hotels, enjoyed meals in cozy restaurants, and often escaped the city whenever they needed a change of scenery. Many of their favorite trips took them to smaller towns throughout Tennessee and neighboring states. Each journey seemed to strengthen the bond between them. As the brush glides slowly across the canvas, perhaps you can picture those quiet road trips. Long highways stretching beneath an open sky. Small towns glowing beneath evening lights. The feeling of leaving everyday worries behind for a little while. Sometimes it is not the destination we remember most, but the company we shared along the way. Over time, however, even familiar adventures began to feel routine. Both Michael and Victoria started looking beyond their usual destinations. They wanted to experience something new, something larger, something farther from home. It was Victoria who suggested their first trip overseas. The idea excited her immediately, and before long, they found themselves planning a journey to Italy. For Victoria, the trip was meant to be a relaxing escape, a chance to enjoy beautiful cities, historic streets, and a different culture. But life had other plans. Sometimes the opportunities that change our future appear when we are not looking for them. During their visit to Milan, Victoria unexpectedly met an old friend from years earlier. The reunion was completely unplanned. Her friend was working at a prestigious beauty company that served high-profile clients throughout the city. As they talked and exchanged stories, an interesting possibility emerged. The company happened to be searching for an experienced beauty specialist. Someone with talent. Someone with proven success. Someone very much like Victoria. The timing seemed almost unbelievable. She had arrived at exactly the right moment. The opportunity was too significant to ignore. For days she thought about it carefully. The position offered professional growth, new experiences, a chance to build an international career, and perhaps most importantly, accepting the offer would not put her existing business at risk. Back home, her salon was thriving. She had trusted employees, managing daily operations, and everything continued to run smoothly even when she traveled. After much consideration, Victoria made her decision. She accepted the offer. The contract was signed. The next chapter of her life had begun. There were still documents to prepare and arrangements to make. That process would take about a month. But once everything was completed, she would move to Milan and begin her new career. As Michael listened to her plans, a mixture of emotions filled his mind. Excitement, pride, uncertainty, and perhaps a little fear. Because sometimes, when one person's future begins to expand, the future of a relationship becomes harder to predict. As the soft colors continue blending together on the canvas, and the story drifts forward at its gentle pace, perhaps this chapter offers another quiet reminder. Life often changes when we least expect it. A train ride becomes a romance. A vacation becomes a career opportunity. A simple choice becomes a turning point. And while we can never fully predict what comes next, we continue moving forward one day, one journey, and one brushstroke at a time. As the weeks passed, Michael and Victoria continued their travels together. Their journey through Italy had been filled with memorable moments, but neither of them was ready to return home just yet. So they kept moving forward. From Milan, they traveled into France. They wandered through elegant streets, enjoyed long conversations over quiet meals, and collected memories that would remain with them for years to come. Their adventure eventually brought them to the glamorous shores of Monte Carlo. There, overlooking the sparkling coastline, it almost felt as though time had slowed down. The days blended gently into one another. One city led to the next. One experience flowed into another. And throughout it all, Victoria seemed completely unconcerned about the cost of their travels. She had worked hard for her success, and she enjoyed using that success to explore the world. Her credit card appeared to open every door with ease. Hotels, restaurants, train tickets, new destinations. Everything seemed within reach. Michael, meanwhile, found himself struggling to keep pace with the lifestyle that surrounded him. The constant travel, the excitement, and the endless movement began to wear him down. By the time they reached Vienna, near the end of their journey, he felt physically exhausted. The months of adventure, had drained much of his energy. Victoria noticed immediately, but rather than becoming upset or disappointed, she responded with understanding and patience. She knew that everyone has limits. She knew that even the strongest people sometimes need rest. And so she encouraged Michael to slow down, to recover, to regain the strength that had carried him through so many adventures. Soon afterward, the two returned home. Back in Nashville, Victoria began focusing on her upcoming move to Milan. There were documents to complete, arrangements to finalize, and countless details that needed attention before she could begin her new life in Italy. At the same time, Michael turned his attention toward another part of his life, the part he had neglected for far too long: his longtime girlfriend, the woman he had once planned to marry. When she questioned where he had been during his extended absence, Michael offered an explanation. He told her that much of his time away had been connected to university commitments and examinations in Chicago. The explanation seemed simple enough. Yet beneath the surface, Michael knew that his life had become far more complicated than anyone around him realized. As the paintbrush drifts softly across the canvas and gentle colors spread across the screen, you may notice how difficult it can be to balance the different parts of our lives. Sometimes we try to keep separate worlds from colliding. Sometimes we convince ourselves that we can manage everything. But life has a way of testing those assumptions. As you get comfortable tonight and settle beneath the quiet glow of the evening, gently subscribe and join me for many more peaceful nights like this. Victoria's upcoming move brought mixed emotions for Michael. In one sense, it felt like a relief. The distance would naturally create space between them. Their meetings would no longer happen so easily. Their relationship would no longer demand constant attention. And for the first time in many months, Michael could focus more fully on the future he had originally planned. The future that included marriage and family with his longtime partner. Yet there was sadness as well, because regardless of the complications, Victoria had become an important part of his life. And now, an ocean would separate them. Before long, Victoria settled into her new life in Milan. The transition went remarkably well. She quickly established herself professionally and adapted to her surroundings. Her career continued to flourish. New opportunities appeared, and she seemed to be building exactly the future she had hoped for. Nearly a year passed. Then one day, Michael sent her unexpected news. News that would change the nature of their relationship forever. In his message, he revealed that he intended to marry the woman he had been dating for several years. The future he had once imagined was finally becoming reality. Yet his message contained another layer of meaning. He suggested that marriage would not necessarily erase the connection they had shared, even if Victoria eventually married someone else. Even if her future unfolded in Italy, he seemed unwilling to let go completely. The message left much unsaid. It carried emotions hidden between the lines. Questions without answers. Feelings neither of them fully explained. After exchanging several messages like these, communication between them gradually faded. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And eventually, silence settled between them. No letters. No phone calls. No messages. Just distance and memories. Then, near the end of October, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, the phone rang. It was Victoria calling from Milan. Her voice sounded warm and familiar, as though no time had passed at all. She told Michael that she wanted to see him. She invited him to visit her in Italy. Without hesitation, she offered to arrange everything. She would send him an airline ticket. She would meet him personally at the airport. And she would be waiting for him when he arrived. For Michael, old feelings immediately resurfaced. The memories, the adventures, the excitement they had once shared. All of it seemed to return in an instant. And before long, he decided to accept the invitation. Back home, he explained to his longtime girlfriend that he needed to travel to Chicago for several days to take care of some university matters. He even asked her not to accompany him to the station. The trip would begin very early in the morning, he explained. There was no need for her to lose sleep. Everything seemed carefully arranged. Everything seemed under control. But life often has surprises, waiting where we least expect them. As the brush drifts quietly across the canvas, and gentle colors blend together beneath the soft light, you may already sense that this journey would not unfold the way Michael imagined. Instead of traveling to Chicago, he boarded a flight bound for Italy. Hours later, he landed in Milan. Excitement filled his thoughts as he entered the airport. He wondered what Victoria would say. He wondered whether their connection had truly survived the distance. He wondered whether this trip might somehow bring back what they had lost. Then he saw her. Victoria was indeed waiting for him. But she was not alone. Standing beside her was another man, an Italian man. Victoria greeted Michael warmly. Yet there was something different about the encounter. Something unexpected. Something he had never imagined. She introduced Michael to the man as her cousin, not as a former lover, not as someone important from her past, simply as a relative visiting from America. The introduction caught him completely off guard. Before he could fully process what was happening, Victoria continued explaining. She told her companion that Michael had been helping members of her family back home. The conversation moved forward politely. The moment passed quickly, and Michael found himself struggling to understand the situation unfolding before him. The three of them left the airport together and went to a nearby restaurant. The conversation remained pleasant. The atmosphere remained friendly. Yet beneath the surface, Michael could feel something shifting. A realization slowly taking shape. The woman who had once traveled across countries with him, the woman who had built dreams around their future, the woman who had invested so much of herself into their relationship, had moved on completely. When the meal ended, Victoria and her companion wished Michael a pleasant stay and a safe journey home. Then they said goodbye. Just like that. No dramatic confrontation. No long explanation. No emotional farewell. Only a simple goodbye. And then they walked away. Michael stood there stunned. For a long time, he had imagined many possible endings to their story. But not this one. Never this one. He had expected memories. Perhaps affection. Perhaps unfinished feelings. Instead, he found closure. A closure he had never asked for. And perhaps never expected. The experience stayed with him. Not because Victoria had been cruel. Not because she had raised her voice. But because life had quietly delivered a lesson he could not ignore. The relationship that had once seemed so powerful, so unforgettable, had become part of the past. And the past was where it would remain. As the paintbrush continues its slow and peaceful movement across the canvas. Perhaps there is a lesson here for all of us. Some people enter our lives for a reason. Some stay longer than others. And some eventually become memories. No matter how important they once seemed. No matter how deeply they touched our hearts. Life continues moving forward. Like a river. Like a train. Like the steady movement of a brush across a canvas. Eventually, Michael finished telling me his story. His voice carried a quiet sadness. Not the sadness of fresh heartbreak, but the softer sadness that comes from understanding something at last. The kind of understanding that only time can provide. As evening settled over the city, we said our goodbyes. I watched him walk away down the street, slowly disappearing into the glow of the downtown lights. For a few moments, I remained standing there, holding my notebook, thinking about everything he had shared. The chance meeting on a train, the adventures across cities and countries, the dreams, the mistakes, the choices, and the ending neither of them had expected. The story was over, but the lesson remained. That love can be beautiful. That passion can be powerful. And that honesty often matters more than either. Because in the end, every chapter of life eventually becomes a memory. And every memory becomes part of the story that shapes who we are. As the final strokes of paint settle gently onto the canvas tonight, perhaps you can allow your own thoughts to slow. The day is finished. The story has reached its end. There is nowhere else to go. Nothing left to solve. Only the quiet comfort of this moment. So let your breathing become calm, let your mind grow still, and drift peacefully towards sleep, knowing that, just like every story, tomorrow will bring the beginning of a brand new chapter. Thank you for spending this time with me on Bedtime Stories on Canvas. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well.